The original recording actually just had a recording of Jo saying, right, I've got to leave now. She was literally the last thing she did in the session with Rob.
Yeah.
And just walked out of the door.
So she had to be ready to fly to get lost.
Yeah.
This episode is sponsored by Aux, the desktop app that helps you collaborate on music projects with anyone, anywhere in the world. Stick around to the end to get a special offer of 50 gigs of storage for just $1.
I did this track with Dimension, who's another drum bass producer that I've worked with before quite a bit. We're good friends, and we've got studios pretty much next door to each other. So he's on the floor below me here.
Right.
And so occasionally we end up collaborating on stuff. And with this, he basically came in one day and was playing me ideas, and he played me the vocal for this song. But it was like completely different and half the tempo. So I'll show you the original vocal. This is the original vocal he played me.
My heart's pulling me over, but my feet won't take me high.
So basically, there's not really like proper lyrics on it yet, and it sounds really slow. But we were playing around with it and basically speeded it up ×2, which is something you'd normally never do,
right?
Because if you were speeding up an a cappella, like ×2 is just going to be too speedy, sort of thing. So I think he already had the idea of like, this would sound quite good speeded up, and
yeah,
we were trying it, and then so what you end up with is this.
Maybe you're back, take me out, I don't wondering why. So take me away, right on the night. I need you to get there, give me the night. So fly on my face and fly off the sky. I need it for a one-way moment to ride. So take me away, I'm needing a high. I wanna go right, heart's ready to fly.
You can hear there, like I think this is like not the original because we've chopped up some sections of it.
Right.
The original recording actually just had a recording of Jo saying, right, I've got to leave now. She was literally the last thing she did in the session with Rob.
Yeah.
And just walked out of the door.
So she had to be ready to fly to get lost.
Yeah, but I mean, that was, so it was quite funny recording the original, and it was all on an SM58, which is like a, handheld mic that you would normally use live. You wouldn't normally use it to record a proper vocal.
And the Happy Hardcore section, was that already in there?
I think so, yeah. I think it was, I think so. Yeah, right.
I love it. I mean, I'm just thinking of the two of you in this room, kind of looking at each other, say, you know what would be good now? Why don't we go Happy Hardcore on it?
Yeah, I mean, Rob had already sort of succumbed to the power of the donk previously, because he wrote this song on his album called Offender, which is a kind of acidy 4/4 drum bass song. So it drops with a 4/4 beat as well. I took a little persuading, I think, initially, because I was like, okay, this is quite like crazy. But
were you thinking my mates from back in the day are going to have a go at me now?
I was actually thinking that they'd be really excited by it.
Yeah.
And I was like, remember sending it to like some of my old school friends and them being like really buzzing about it. So it's good, yeah. But yeah, I think the crowd reaction to it was great, and that's often, not always, but sometimes what really excites you to finish stuff. And we were trying to, with the first drop, we were trying to fuse it with like you were saying, like modern jump up drum and bass, which is and we can go into some of the like sound design for that in a minute, because I think
that would be cool.
That's like an interesting thing to talk about.
Today's show is brought to you by our friends at Aux. Our podcast looks in depth at the creative process, but one part of the process that we don't talk about is how painful it can be to manage these creative projects. Currently, it involves numerous apps, websites, and tools for file storage, sending large projects, or providing detailed feedback. The team at Aux are here to change that. The aux app keeps your DAW project synced up in the background, so you don't have to wait for your collaborators to upload their latest version. And what's unique is that you can leave detailed, time-stamped comments on the track and project stems, making feedback so much more precise and easy to manage. You can also relax knowing your projects are backed up too. The app is free for up to 10 gigs of project files, but there's a special offer for Take Notes listeners. 50 gigs of file storage for just $1 per month by using the code TAKENOTES, all one word, when you subscribe to the starter plan. Visit aux.app/take notes to get the full details. And now, on with the show.
This is the sort of mid-bass on its own. I think we ended up taking out a lot of bass from this sound. You get sort of trends in sort of bass sound design. I feel like there's something I'm noticing a lot at the moment is sounds that aren't detuned at all, because you kind of get a lot of power by just stacking oscillators doing things. Quite often I'll put a distortion on a synth and just then play around with oscillators and their tuning until you get some interesting harmonics going on. A lot of the time it's to do with having fifths or major thirds. Sometimes even like making the oscillators like incredibly far apart tuning wise, like making one like up 4 octaves and one down 3 will create this kind of weird mixture of sounds when you distort them together.
So a lot of trial and error.
Yeah, lots of trial and error and lots of, well, I think you sort of find techniques like this and then you sort of explore what the possibilities of them are. So this is an example of a sort of that kind of technique where I'm using an emulation of the Culture Vulture on this sound, and then these are sine waves.
Wow.
And you're changing the sync, which sort of changes like, I guess, the wavelength here without changing the frequency.
Right.
But then it would be like putting that into like low passes to kind of shape it into something. But the vocal process was interesting. So we, at one point when we were ready to, when we'd rewritten the lyrics, we got Joe back in to do the re-record, but we did a kind of mic shootout at the same time. So we had an SM58 and a U87, a Neumann mic, which is like a high-end mic that people would use for vocals. In a lot of studios, that's kind of the industry standard. And we ended up way preferring the SM58 on this particular song because I think it had that feeling of, it just gave it more of a sampley kind of feeling. And we literally recorded all the takes with both mics. I think also the original a cappella we worked in had the reverb baked into it, and we may have done that a little bit as well, because it's a bit like how you would work with a sample. Often when you get an a cappella of something, it has the effects, the delays and reverbs into it already.
Yeah. And
chopping up that already has delays and reverbs on it gives it a cool sound.
Yeah.
So we did actually record it. We recorded all the vocals halftime again and then speeded them up.
Right. So the same approach.
So all of her recordings would have been at 87 originally. It was quite a process because once we'd recorded all of them halftime, then sped them up, we were then like, you get some cool artifacts from that, but you also, her vibrato was sounding cool, speeded up, but a little extreme. So we then put it into Melodyne and took down the amount of vibrato in Melodyne. So basically sort of highlighted all the warbly bits and then dragged them sort of down a bit. So
right.
They were just a little bit less extreme.
It is interesting hearing the sped up version, just because with certain words, it sounds like she ends them really suddenly.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I think we kind of worked on that a bit and got her to elongate certain things more than
because it doesn't sound like that in the finished version. But it's interesting how speeding up can create one effect, which is really great, and then another. It's almost like a byproduct of it is like, oh no, and obviously that's why you ended up putting all the work in to get it the way you wanted it to.
Yeah, I think the process of working on vocals is often just so important to be really hot on the detail. You know, there's so many sessions in the past where I've recorded something and then realized I'm missing something when they've left. So it's definitely about being really detail orientated and picking up on those sort of things whilst you're in the session.
Yeah.